Who are they? They are the ones in control. They are the ones that have been foretold. They lurk in the shadows, behind the curtain, keeping us in the dark, that you can be certain. They mold and shape our mind so that we may never shine. They wrote our history books so that we may never know where to look. They prey upon our apathy in a plot you can't untwist. Policing how you think and feel, they tighten an iron fist. They create our distractions so they may prepare for the coming attractions. All the world's a stage, we are trapped in this cage. They are the men who built America. They are the men who will destroy it. Power is their currency, their DNA. As they hide in plain sight, we wither away. They are the masters of deception, their media creating lies since its inception. Telling lies to your vision, it's called programming for a reason. They are behind the big charade. Blackmail, deceit, treason, their stock and trade. They are behind the ageless plot, knowing they will never be caught, unless we stir up the pot. Who are they? They are who you should never obey. People often ask the question, why is the world being defrauded, deceived, manipulated, enslaved? What is the root cause? The root cause is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was created in a secret meeting of political and banking elites at a private resort on Jekyll Island in Georgia in 1912. The conspirators attended in seal railway cars and only used their first names so that the servants would have no way of identifying the men. From their own memoirs, these men admitted to their conspiratorial plans. Out of this secret meeting came the most powerful privately and foreign-owned corporation the world has ever known. Through its control of our money, the elite that own the Fed control other banks, assets, corporations, media, politicians, militaries, and ultimately you. The Federal Reserve is the head of the snake, the root cause of the entire enslavement of humanity. The Fed system is designed to imprison us through never-ending debt and fool us into believing our money has value, when it is in fact worthless, backed by nothing, based on debt, created out of thin air, recipe for enslavement. And this system was also designed to one day crash. The debt bubble we are currently living in is unimaginably large, and when it bursts, the world is going to experience financial chaos like it has never seen before, and it is only a matter of time. Were it not for this insidious, privately owned organization, we would be living in a completely different world and reality. In the end, things really didn't have to turn out this way. We did not have to adopt a debt-based financial system. We did not have to allow the bankers to enslave us all with debt. But our government allowed this to happen. They gave them the power to issue our currency, ultimately giving them the ultimate power over us. And this was the plan all along.
There's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table to figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. Nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. Yeah. You know? And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Hey, this is Larkin Rose. I was going to title this video, Why There Is Hope. And it actually does end with some very positive, hopeful stuff. But first I have to offend and insult a lot of people. And to make it worse, the people I will be offending and insulting are very good people with very good intentions who are working very hard at what they believe in. So I'm sure this is going to win me tons of friends. And there's somebody out there, and it's your fault I'm doing this video today, and you know who you are. To get right to the point, most activism is completely worthless. In fact, it's worse than completely worthless. It accomplishes more harm than good. Now again, I want to distinguish between good intentions and good results, because there are lots and lots of things that fall within the realm of activism. And I'm not saying all activism, but most of it actually does less than no good. And while I'm at it, I'll say I speak from experience. Many years ago, when I still believed in statism, I was politically active, and I campaigned, and I played those games, and I wrote to my congressman and did all that stuff. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it now, but Yeah, I did that too, and at the time I really and truly believed that I was fighting the right fight. I was fighting against the beast. It only occurred to me many years later that actually I was feeding the beast lots and lots of fuel. So I don't make this video to be nasty at people. I do it because I don't want people's good intentions to be wasted on something that does less than no good. And I kind of wish back then somebody had straightened me out. Don't know whether I would have listened, but I wish somebody would have tried to straighten me out and say, yeah, all that voting and petitioning and all that fun stuff doesn't actually accomplish anything. And if you look throughout history at the people who have protested and had demonstrations and voted and ran for office and did petitions for this or that legislation or against this or that legislation, and if you look what they've accomplished, it's almost nothing. And very rarely there are actually exceptions, but for the most part, it's nothing. The people in power kept doing what they were doing, and the people protesting and petitioning and whining about it spent just huge amounts of time and effort and money and accomplished pretty much nothing. And let me just throw this in. I seriously want to ask activists, people who consider themselves activists, do you think there's the slightest prayer in the world of you actually winning the game that you're playing? Because if you look at standard basic activism, I mean, take the example of protesting wars. People go out, you know, hundreds, thousands, maybe millions go out and protest in the streets. We don't like this war. We think it's horrible and nasty. How long have people been doing that? How long have people been protesting that? Pretty much forever. And is there still perpetual warmongering going on? Yeah. Are innocent people still dying? Yeah. Are innocent civilians on the other side of the world being killed by U.S. troops? Yeah. Is it going to keep happening if people protest? Yep. So how many activists actually think that, well, if we have one more protest, suddenly the people in power are going to go, oh, you're right, sorry about that, we're bringing all the troops home? If you don't really think you're, first of all, if you do think you're going to win, if you think you're one protest away from making the control freaks wise up and be good and noble people, you're not. And if you don't think that, if you think it's going to continue the way it's gone for the last forever, which is you complain and completely righteously, you make these heartfelt objections, and it just keeps right on going. The war machine keeps grinding along, keeps grinding up innocent lives. If you don't think you're going to win, why do you keep doing it? Now, speaking for myself, back when I was politically active, I didn't think there was another choice. That was the only fight I could fathom, is try to get somebody different in office or call your congressman and protest. That's all I knew that there was. And that is key. Because if the people in power can convince you that your only recourse, the only civilized approach for you to take, is begging and petitioning and whining, you're doomed. If that's all that's inside your narrow view of what you can accomplish in the world, you don't accomplish anything. The slave masters are thrilled to death. You throw away all your time, all your effort, all your money into something that will accomplish exactly nothing. And I'm not saying this to make people feel bad. Again, I want people's good intentions to accomplish something. And most activism does not accomplish anything. Well, it doesn't accomplish anything positive. It actually accomplishes things in the other direction. Like I said, back when I did it, I didn't realize I was actually feeding the beast that I was trying to defeat. See, the problem with most activists is that they don't actually know what the problem is. The problem is they don't know what the problem is. As Thoreau put it, there are 1,000 people hacking at the branches of evil to one striking at its root. And that's totally true, and you can see it throughout the world and throughout history. We see symptoms of the problem all over the place, and there's, more examples of that than anyone could possibly count. Whether it's a war, or like what they're doing to Bradley Manning, what they're doing to Snowden, the war on drugs, the warrantless searches, all the symptoms of the problem, and there's an endless list of symptoms of the problem that are totally worth getting angry about and saying, this is horrible, we have to do something about this. Trouble is, most activists don't actually recognize the cause. They see the symptoms and say, look at this horrible symptom. And if you don't know the cause, you don't know how to stop the symptom. I mean, if we had a big protest and rah, 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 they let Bradley Manning go, do you think, first of all, Do you think that's going to happen? Second of all, if it did, do you think government from now on would say, yeah, when people point out that we're evil, murderous psychos, let's just let it slide? You know, that's not going to happen. No amount of protests and votes and petitions are going to make that happen. And I hope even the activists are honest enough to admit that that is not ever, ever going to happen. So, if you're treating the symptom because you don't know what the cause is, that doesn't do any good. And if you're actually reinforcing the cause, that's worse than no good. And I'm here to say most political activists are reinforcing the problem while they holler and scream at the symptoms. And they'll go out there and say, well, we need to raise awareness. Okay, is anybody not aware that government does evil stuff? Pretty sure everybody kind of gets that. You know, getting the details out there and getting information out there, I like that. That's good. That's worthwhile. So good. Now we have a lot of people that knows that the government's evil and vicious and violent and murderous. And it still is. Like, you raise awareness, and then what? People are aware of it, okay? In some ways, maybe it would be better if they weren't. At least they could be happier while living as slaves. If the goal is to raise awareness and then nothing, that doesn't accomplish anything. And a thing I hear all the time, which, you know, these people have really good intentions, and I hate to burst their bubble, but people say, this is our last chance to save the Republic. First of all, no. The Republic was doomed from the second the Constitution was written. Absolutely doomed. It was an authoritarian ruling class, theoretically limited. It was doomed to be here. And if you read what the Anti-Federalists wrote, they knew it. They predicted perfectly. They actually underestimated how drastically it would collapse into tyranny. But they knew it. The Republic was doomed the moment it began. But people talk as if this is our last chance. If we can just pass this thing or get the right person in office, we can save the Republic. One, no we can't. Two, no we shouldn't. Hell with the Republic. Let it crash, let it burn. It should not exist. A republic is a ruling class. It is a parasitic gang of thugs and thieves. That's all a republic is. And I know there are lots of people who still adore the Constitution and think there's something magical and righteous about a republic. It's just a slightly different arrangement of how to be an evil, control freak, parasitic, immoral monster. It doesn't really make any difference. And if you don't believe me, if you want a few references to republics in history, democratic republics, representative democratic republics, try People's Republic of China, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, meaning North Korea, the Weimar Republic, out of which the Nazi Empire grew. Does it seem like republics lead to happiness and peace and justice? So no, don't try to restore a republic. You're trying to restore the problem. Don't try to restore the problem. That doesn't freaking help. And again, this gets back to the fact that the activists don't understand what the problem is. They don't understand that authoritarianism is the problem. The problem is not and has never been who is on the throne. The problem is and has always been and will always be until people wake up that there is a throne there to be on. And as long as the argument is what government should do, who should run it, what form it should take, you're just tinkering with the details and completely ignoring the heart of the problem, which is the belief in government and authoritarianism. So any activism that doesn't hit at that belief, that doesn't strike at that root, is worse than worthless. Not only does it treat symptoms that aren't going to change anyway, but it actually reinforces in the minds of all the listeners and viewers that that heart cannot be touched. That of course we need government. You know, I hear people, it's funny, I am anti-government. I'm 100% anti-government because government is inherently immoral and evil and destructive. The belief in it is the complete antithesis of humanity. So I'm completely anti-government. And I find it funny that other groups get accused of that who aren't. They just want a slightly different flavor of authoritarian ruling class. But those groups will then say, oh, we're not anti-government. We just want the right kind of, and I just think, oh, okay, so you're not pro-freedom. You're not pro-morality. You have no idea what the problem is and therefore no ability to fix it. And a lot of people say, well, we have common goals and we have a common enemy, so can't we just sort of ignore the little details of disagreement? This is not a detail of the disagreement. This is the only issue that matters. Do you own yourself, or are you the property of a ruling class? I don't care if it's a limited ruling class. I don't care if it's a Democratic ruling class. I don't care if it's a Republican ruling class. I don't care if it's a constitutional ruling class. If there's some beast that has the right to take your money and boss you around, it owns you. You're not free, you don't own yourself. And if you actually believe that, why do you ever imagine you will achieve freedom? You're not even free inside your own head. And so when people say, well, these little differences, this is not a little difference. Either you think there can be someone with the right to rule you, or you understand that there can be no such thing. Or you understand the concepts of self-ownership and the non-aggression principle and what those logically lead to, which is legitimate government is a logical impossibility. It cannot exist. Not just it's really hard to maintain, it's theoretically and conceptually insane to think there can be a moral and righteous gang of thugs and thieves who bosses people around and takes their money. It just doesn't work philosophically or morally or logically. So to all those activists out there who are hacking at the symptoms, I feel your pain, but it isn't doing any good. If you don't even understand what the core problem is, you will do what protesters and activists around the world for hundreds of years have done, which is nothing. Bash your head against a brick wall, scream and holler, and accomplish nothing. Okay, now, like I said, I was going to call this Why There Is Hope. So far, we haven't heard a lot of hope in this video yet. Here's why there is hope. There are a lot of people now who are coming to see the actual problem, who are recognizing the source of all those little symptoms you see. The warmongering and the fascist police stops and the war on drugs and the detaining people and just all the little symptoms that people can point to and say, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad, police abuse, everything else. There are a lot of people, thousands and thousands, who are coming to recognize the underlying cause, the real problem, which is the belief in government and authority. If you don't fix that, you don't fix anything. If all you can do is bicker over what you hope the masters will tell you or who your masters will be, you're just doomed. But there are a lot of people all the way waking up to the problem. And a lot of these people tell me, you know, I am kind of ashamed that I wasted so much time and effort on activism before. And that's true of me too. Like I said before, I did lots of activism and now I look back and think, why on earth was I so gullible that I thought that was the thing to do about it? And it's only because I didn't recognize the problem. I could see nasty symptoms, I wanted them to stop, but I didn't take the time to actually understand the real cause, which is the cult of statism. But the good news is that there are lots and lots and lots of people who are all the way waking up to the fundamental problem. And I'm often tempted, because I get emails just about every other day from somebody telling me, wow, for years and years I was a constitutionalist, or some of them were even like socialists or Democrats, Republicans, whatever they were, who say, wow, I finally understand now how inherently bogus and immoral the entire game of politics is. And just to brag a bit, a lot of people send me these messages after reading my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. Say, holy smokes, well, I mean, I knew it. So many people tell me, I sort of knew this. It's like this was already in my head, but it wasn't quite clear. And I say, I know, that's who I wrote it for, because I went through the process myself of slowly escaping statism. And when you get to the realization of you know, the concept of self-ownership, you look back and think, how on earth did I ever not know this? And you feel like somewhere inside I had to know this. It's so dang obvious. But literally about every other day, sometimes every day when it's a good week, I will get emails from people who go on and on for a few paragraphs saying, holy smokes, I suddenly see the world in a completely different way. I suddenly realize that all the voting and all the playing stuff inside the game of politics was not only completely pointless, but it reinforced the lie in my own head and to everybody I was, you know, to everybody in front of me watching me do political activism. So people are waking up in droves, and it is my favorite thing in the world to get emails from people. So if this happened to you, email me. I might not even respond very much, but I love to hear it when people say, holy smokes, you're right, There is no such thing as government. There can be no such thing as government or authority. We each own ourselves. Maybe we should start acting like it. And that is happening all over the place. And the beauty is, when that reaches a certain point, the solution happens by itself. To sound a little bit pompous, if everyone in this country except government and its mercenaries believed what I do about government, there wouldn't be government the next day. And it wouldn't require a revolution. It wouldn't require overthrowing them. If 300 million people just said, yeah, we're not giving you money anymore and we're not going to obey anymore, because we understand that this giant elaborate game that you did to give the appearance that you have the right to rule us, we understand it's all bogus, so you're just psychos. Now we recognize you as the sociopathic parasites you are, and we'll have nothing more to do with you. We don't feel the need to come overthrow you or vote or campaign. We're just going to ignore you. You don't matter. And when people come to this realization, they realize the only reason the crooks in DC matter is because we make them matter by imagining the authority to be real. And that's what my silly little video, The Tiny Dot, is about. When you see the difference in numbers, it becomes pretty obvious that all of their power comes from the perceptions of their victims. If the victims stop imagining an obligation to bow to this tiny little dot of liars and crooks, we're done. No revolution required, no violence required, none of that. Poof, we're done. It's over. And I think we're just charging in that direction, because I see thousands and thousands of people waking up and saying, whoa, I finally actually understand this. I've been sort of looking around the edges till now, and now I actually get it. And that doesn't go backwards. People who realize that don't next week say, yeah, I believe in government again. It just kind of doesn't happen. And most of the time when I get messages from people say, wow, I finally understand what freedom really is and what self-ownership really means, that's almost always followed by, and now I'm telling other people about it. And that's something you can't stop that. You know, I won't guess an exact date, but this will spread until the cult of statism falls and is gone forever. So to all you activists, I would beg you to take a brief break from your protest or your event or your whatever the next thing it is you're doing, to actually reconsider your own belief system and what you believe about authority and government and law and all that fun stuff. Because you may find, as thousands of people I know have already found, that your incomplete understanding of reality is leading you to waste tons of time and effort and money on something that doesn't do any good. And the good news is, if and when enough people understand the truth, it doesn't even take that much time and energy and money to actually fix this. You don't have to do anything to the ruling class. You don't have to vote it out. You don't have to overthrow it. You don't have to do anything except ignore it. And if 300 million people choose to ignore something, that's pretty darn easy to do. Well, how much effort does that take to simply not pay any attention to the parasites in Washington? But for that to happen, people have to recognize the underlying problem. And they are in droves, but I would really, really urge anybody who's out there fighting and fighting for justice, back up long enough to figure out if what you're fighting is a symptom or the actual cause, and if you might accidentally be helping the monster that you're trying to fight against.
You cannot begin to imagine in how many ways the world is the opposite of what you have been taught to believe. You see the guy who sells drugs to willing customers so he can feed his family as the scum of the earth, while you see the hypocrite who gives away stolen money in the name of government as a saint. You see the guy who tries to avoid being robbed by the federal thugs as a crook and a tax cheat, but see as virtuous the politician who gives away the same stolen loot to people to whom it does not belong. You see the cop as a good guy when he drags a man away from his friends and family and throws him in prison for 10 years for smoking a leaf. And you see anyone who defends himself from such barbaric fascism as the lowest form of life, a cop killer. In reality, most drug dealers are more virtuous than any government social worker, and prostitutes have far less to be ashamed of than political whores, because they trade only with what is rightfully theirs and only with those who want to trade with them. The upstanding, church-going, law-abiding, tax-paying citizen who votes Democrat or Republican is far more despicable and a bigger threat to humanity than the most promiscuous, lazy, drug-snorting hippie. Why? Because the hippie is willing to let others be free, and the voter is not. The damage done to society by bad habits and loose morality is nothing compared to the damage done to society by the self-righteous violence committed in the name of the state. You imagine yourselves to be charitable and tolerant when you are nothing of the sort. Even the Nazis had table manners and proper etiquette when they weren't killing people. You think you're good people because you say please and thank you? You think sitting in that big building on Sunday makes you noble and righteous? The difference between you and a common thief is that the thief has the honesty to commit the crime himself, while you whine for government to do your stealing for you. The difference between you and the street thug is that the thug is open about the violence he commits, while you let others forcibly control your neighbors on your behalf. You advocate theft, harassment, assault, and even murder, but accept no responsibility for doing so. You old folks want the government to steal from your kids so you can get your monthly check. You parents want all your neighbors to be robbed to pay for your kids' schooling. You all vote for whichever crook promises to steal money from other people to pay for what you want. You demand that those people who engage in behaviors you don't approve of be dragged off and locked up, but feel no guilt for the countless lives your whims have destroyed. You even call the government thugs your representatives, and yet you never take responsibility for the evil they commit. You proudly support the troops as they kill whomever the liars in D.C. tell them to kill, and you feel good about it. You call yourselves Christians or Jews or claim to follow some other religion, but the truth is what you call your religion is empty window dressing. What you truly worship, the God you really bow to, what you really believe in is the state. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder, unless you can do it by way of government. Then it's just fine, isn't it? If you call it taxation and war, it stops being a sin, right? After all, it was only your God that said you shouldn't steal and murder, but the state said it was okay. It's pretty obvious which one outranks the other in your minds. Despite all the churches, synagogues, and mosques we see around us, this nation has one God and only one God, and that God is called government. Jesus taught nonviolence and told you to love your neighbor, but the state encourages you to vote for people who will use the violence of government to butt into every aspect of everyone else's life. Which do you believe? To those about to stone a woman who had committed adultery, Jesus said, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." But the state says it's perfectly fine to lock someone up if they do something you find distasteful, such as prostitution. Which do you believe? The Christian God says, "Thou shalt not covet," but coveting is the lifeblood of the beast that is the state. You are taught to resent, despise, and hate anyone who has anything you don't have. You clamor for the state to tear other people down, steal their property, and give it to you. And you call that fairness. The Bible calls it coveting and stealing. You are not Christians. You are not Jews. You are not Muslims. And you certainly aren't atheists. You all have the same God, and its name is government. You're all members of the most evil, insane, destructive cult in history. If there ever was a devil, the state is it, and you worship it with all your heart and soul. You pray to it to solve every problem, to satisfy all your needs, to smite your enemies, and to shower its blessings upon you. You worship what Nietzsche called the coldest of all cold monsters, and you hate those of us who don't. To you, the greatest sin is disobeying your God, breaking the law, you call it, as if anyone could possibly have any moral obligation to obey the arbitrary commands and demands of the corrupt, lying, delusional megalomaniacs who infest this despicable town. Even your ministers, priests, and rabbis, more often than not, are traitors to their own religions. teaching that the commands of human authority should supersede adherence to the laws of the gods they say they believe in. Several years ago, I heard one pompous evangelical jackass in particular pontificating on the radio that anyone who disobeys the civil authority, be it a king or any other government, is engaging in rebellion against God. Those were the exact words he used. What if the government is doing something wrong? Well, this salesman for Satan opined, that is the business of those in government, and you are still obligated to obey. Everywhere you turn, be it the state or the church, the media or the schools, you are taught one thing above all else: the virtue of subjugating yourselves to mortals who claim to have the right to rule you. It is sickening the reverence with which you speak of the liars and thieves whose feet are so firmly planted on your necks. You call the congressmen and the judges honorable, and you swoon at the magnificence of the grandiose halls they inhabit, the temples they built to celebrate the domination of mankind. You feel pride at being able to say you once shook a senator's hand or saw the president in person. Ah, yes, the grand deity himself, His Royal Highness, the President of the United States of America. You speak the title as if you're referring to God Almighty. The vocabulary has changed a bit, but your mindset is no different from that of the groveling peasants of old who bowed low, faces in the dirt, with a feeling of unworthiness and humility when in the presence of whatever narcissist had declared himself to be their rightful lord and master. The truth of the matter, back then and today, is that these parasites who call themselves leaders are not superior beings. They are not great men and women. They are not honorable. They're not even average. The people who earn an honest living, from sophisticated millionaire entrepreneurs to illiterate day laborers doing the most menial tasks you can imagine, those people deserve your respect. Those people you should treat with courtesy and civility. But the frauds who claim the right to rule you and demand your subservience and obedience, they deserve only your scorn and contempt. Those who seek so-called high office are the lowest of the low. They may dress better, have larger vocabularies, and do a better job of planning out and executing their schemes, but they are no better than pickpockets, muggers, and carjackers. In fact, they are worse, because they don't want to rob you of just your possessions. They want to rob you of your very humanity, deprive you of your free will, by slowly leeching away your ability to think, to judge, to act, reducing you to slaves in both body and mind. And still you persist in calling them leaders. Leaders? Where is it that you think you're going exactly that would require you to have a leader? If you just live your own life and mind your own damn business, exercising your own talents, pursuing your own dreams, striving to be what you believe you should be, what possible use would you have for a leader? Do you ever actually think about the words that you hear, the words that you repeat? You parrot oxymoronic terms such as the leader of the free world, even pretending for a moment that there is some huge journey or some giant battle that everyone in the entire nation is undertaking together that would require a leader. Why would you ever think, even for a moment, that the crooks that infest this town are the sort of people you should listen to or emulate or follow anywhere? Somewhere inside your mostly dormant brains, you know full well that politicians are all corrupt liars and thieves, opportunistic con men, exploiters, and fearmongers. You know all this, and yet you still speak as if you are the ones who are the stupid, vicious animals, while the politicians are the great, wise role models, teachers, and leaders without whom civilization could not exist. You think these crooks are the ones who make civilization possible? What belief could be more absurd? Yet when they do their pseudo-religious rituals, deciding how to control you this week, you still call it law, and continue to treat their arbitrary demands as if they were moral decrees from the gods that no decent person would ever consider disobeying. You have become so thoroughly indoctrinated into the cult of state worship that you are truly shocked. when the occasional sane person states the bleeding obvious. The mere fact that the political crooks wrote something down and declared their threats to be law does not mean that any human being anywhere has the slightest moral obligation to obey. Every moment of every day, in every location and every situation, you have a moral obligation to do what you deem to be right, not what some delusional bloated windbag says is legal. And that requires you to first determine right and wrong for yourself, a responsibility you spend much time and effort trying to dodge. You proclaim how proud you are to be law-abiding citizens and express your utter contempt for anyone who considers himself above your so-called laws, laws that are nothing more than the selfish whims of tyrants and thieves. The word crime once meant an act harmful to another person. Now it means disobedience to any one of the myriad of arbitrary commands coming from a parasitical criminal class. To you, the term crime is nearly synonymous with the word sin, implying that the ones whose commands are being disobeyed must be something akin to gods, when in truth they are more akin to leeches. The very phrase, taking the law into your own hands, perfectly expresses what a sacrilege it is in your eyes for a mere human being to take upon himself the responsibility to judge right from wrong and to act accordingly, instead of doing what you do, unthinkingly obeying whatever capricious commands this cesspool of maggots spews forth. You glorify this criminal class as lawmakers and believe that no one is lower than a lawbreaker, someone who would dare disobey the politicians. Likewise, you speak with pious reverence of law enforcers, those who forcibly impose the politicians' every whim upon the rest of us. When the state uses violence, you imagine it to be inherently righteous and just, and if anyone resists, they are, in your eyes, contemptible lowlifes, lawless terrorist criminals. Like the lawless terrorist criminals who helped slaves escape the plantations. Like the lawless terrorist criminals who helped Jews escape the killing machine of the Third Reich. Like the lawless terrorist criminals who were crushed to death under the tanks of the Red Chinese government in Tiananmen Square. Like all the lawless terrorist criminals in history who had the courage to disobey the never-ending stream of tyrants and oppressors who have called their violence authority and law. And that includes the lawless terrorist criminals who founded this country. Everything you think you know is upside down, backwards, and inside out. But what has to take the cake, the height of your insanity, is the fact that you view as violent terrorists the only people on the planet who oppose the initiation of violence against their fellow men. Anarchists, voluntarists, and libertarians. We use violence only to defend ourselves against someone who initiates violence against us. We use it for nothing else. Meanwhile, your belief system is completely schizophrenic and self-contradictory. On the one hand, you teach the young slaves that violence is never the answer. Yet out of the other side of your mouths, you advocate that everyone and everything, everywhere and at all times be controlled, monitored, taxed, and regulated through the force of government. In short, you are teaching your children that the masters may use violence whenever they please, but the slave should never resist. You indoctrinate your children into a life of unthinking, helpless subservience. You are putting the chains around their little necks and fastening the locks tight. And worst of all, you feel good about it. Out of one side of your mouths, you condemn the evils of fascism and socialism and lament the injustices of the regimes of Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. While out of the other side of your mouths, you preach exactly what they did. The worship of the collective, the subjugation of every individual to that evil insanity that wears the deceptive label, the common good. You babble on and on about diversity and open-mindedness, and then beg your masters to regulate and control every aspect of everyone's lives, creating a giant herd of unthinking conformist drones. You wear different clothes and have different hairstyles, and you think that makes you different. Yet all your minds are enslaved to the same club of masters and controllers. You think what they tell you to think and do what they tell you to do while imagining yourselves to be progressive, thinking, and enlightened. From your position of relative comfort and safety, you now condemn the evils of other lands and other times while turning a blind eye to the injustices happening right in front of you. You tell yourself that had you lived in those other places, in those other times, you would have been among those who stood up against oppression and defended the downtrodden. But that is a lie. You would have been right there with the rest of the flock of well-trained sheep, loudly demanding that the slaves be beaten, that the witches be burned, that the nonconformists and rebels be destroyed. How do I know this? Because that is exactly what you are doing today. Today's injustices and oppressions are fashionable and popular, and those who resist them, you tell yourselves, are just malcontents and freaks, people whose rights don't matter, people who deserve to be crushed under the boot of authority. Isn't that right? You bunch of spineless, unthinking hypocrites, look in the mirror. Take a good look at what you imagine to be righteous and kind. You are the devil's plaything. The crowds of thousands wildly applauding the speeches of Adolf Hitler, that was you. The mob demanding that Jesus Christ be nailed to the cross, that was you. The white invaders who celebrated the wholesale slaughter of those godless redskins, that was you. The throngs filling the Colosseum, applauding as the Christians were fed to the lions, that was you. Throughout history, the perpetual suffering and injustice occurring on an incomprehensible scale, it was all because of people just like you. The well-trained, thoroughly indoctrinated conformists, the people who do as they're told, who proudly bow to their masters, who follow the crowd, believing what everyone else believes and thinking whatever authority tells them to think. That is you. And your ignorance is not because the truth is not available to you. There have been radicals preaching it for thousands of years. No, you are ignorant because you shun the truth with all your heart and soul. You close your eyes and run away when a hint of reality lands in front of you. You condemn as extremists and fringe kooks those who try to show you the chains you wear because you don't want to be free. You don't even want to be human. Responsibility and reality scare the hell out of you, so you cling tightly to your own enslavement and lash out at any who seek to free you from it. When someone opens the door to your cage, you cower back in the corner and yell, "Close it, close it." Well, some of us are finished with trying to save you. We've wasted enough effort trying to convince you that you should be free. All you ever do is spout back what your masters have taught you, that being free only leads to chaos and destruction, while being obedient and subservient leads to peace and prosperity. There are none so blind as those who will not see. And you nation of sheep, would rather die than see the truth.